Okay. Hello. All right. Very good. So I sometimes stand, but sometimes I need to sit down because I'm so tired from it. I still didn't put the house back together. At least I did the laundry, but I still have to make the beds. I've got to put. Yeah, I do everything myself. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the sheet which we had begun last week. We were talking about all the great the Torah man, great Rabbanim from the 18th century. And we did, there are actually a lot of these were people, some from Eastern Europe, some from Germany. And then we also talked about some great Sephardic scholars. And now we're up to the Chida, which I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he also, this is a Sephardic Rav. And his dates there are 1724 to 1806. He was one of the greatest Sephardic contemporaries of Sar Shalom Shrabi, which we had done last time. Sharabi, I think it's Sharabi. Okay, and if you look back at page 7, you can get information about Sharabi. And he was and his quote, that's how they refer to their Rabban. And he came from, he was born in Yerushalayim to a very prominent family. And then, through his teachings, his writings, he was an outstanding scholar, both halacha and Kabbalah. Or sometimes, depending where you came from, it was just halacha, or it might have been just Kabbalah, but he, was prominent in both these fields. And he was a member of that Sar Shalom, the Sharabi guy, who had his own group of Kabbalists, who would flock around. The Chida traveled extensively throughout Europe as an emissary for the Yeshivot of Eretz Israel. In other words, he was a Mashiach, schnuttering for contributions to the Yeshivot. But this really truly was a very a great Rav, a scholar. So he would visit towns. He would give obviously the shiur or several, who knows, and this would reflect positively on whoever was collecting for, and hopefully, as a result, people would give more generously. And during his travels, he collected a great amount of bibliographic information incorporated into some of his well-known bibliographic works. I mean, but one's called Va'ad Chachamim, one's called Shem L'Gedolim. So he wrote, like biographies of various Gedolim. And he also wrote additional works on the Shulchan Aruch. Remember, he said he was a halachas, so that was studied the Shulchan Aruch, plus obviously commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch as well. And then he himself wrote further explanations. He died in Leghorn, Italy, in the year 1806, and his tomb was considered a holy place to which many Jews came on pilgrimage. But today, in 1960, they removed his remains to Jerusalem, and he is buried there. So I don't know where. He's in Haram and Hod.
Along with all the there's a whole section there of target.
Oh, interesting. I mean, I go there. My parents are buried there, but I really just go directly to my parents. My brother shows me. Actually, he finds there's a place where he parks, which is fairly close. My parents are buried. I tell you, the older I get, though, it gets worse and worse to walk there. And it seems, well, there's no, it's fairly flat to get to where my parents are, but there's like no space. I mean, if you go to American cemeteries, yeah, well, hey, let me tell you, but it's not good for older people. I mean, I actually have to hold on to the tombstones as I'm walking down. I just, the other way, I could manage it. And Har HaZeitim, where my Donnie is buried, that's even worse because that is hill, right? And also there's like no space, there's no path at all. All right, so we talked about the Chida. I would have to look that up. This, I got this from one particular source. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, interesting. Okay, I'll have to look further, into that. Another great Sephardic rav from this time, and his name I had never heard of before. Here he is called the Maharit al-Ghazni, and his dates are 1727 to 1802. His father before, in other words, if you go back several, Rabbanim, you'll find the father's name, Rabbi Yom Tov al-Ghazni, was an outstanding Kabbalist. You notice how a lot of the Sephardim, right there, emphasis is on Kabbalah, and also a Talmudic scholar. But if we're going to start Napoleon, get those sheets here. He was a colleague and a dear friend of the Chida. He studied under his father and also Rabbi Sharabi over there. Upon Rabbi Sharabi's death in 1777, so just think about that, 1776, that's the American Revolution. So this is what I don't know how interested they were in the American Revolution. I mean, certainly England fought against, France was, Lafayette, came to help out the American forces, General Lafayette. Have you all heard of him, Lafayette? And he has statues in different places. Okay. He was a Frenchman. Upon Sharabi's death in 70, Rabbi Yom Tov was appointed as a Rav and a Dayan in Yerushalayim. And a few years later, he was appointed Rishon LeZion. And I found it interesting, even though the prior 2 centuries, there were many, many great Rabbanim were coming to fact. But as the conditions had turned, white for there. Oh, it's around that time? Oh, because I noticed they're all in Yerushalayim. Nobody listed as coming from, or even of the other towns. It was in the 1700s or was it 1800s? I thought that first. I thought it was in the 1800s. I'll have to look it up. I don't remember. What's that? Right. So we're not hearing about them anymore as being from Tzfat. They're all, as I say, they're all from Yerushalayim. I mean, that would make sense about the earthquake, but I don't know. I have to look up and find the exact year. Interesting, when he was on a fundraising trip, he had gone to Italy. Remember, a lot of them did this, went around. Later on, there was, let's see, more in 19th century. They had something that was established in Europe to aid the very, very poor, Jews who were living in Israel at the time. Yes, mostly from Yerushalayim. For the Chalukah, Lichalek, to dole out, funds. But I didn't see any mention of it being called Chalukah. They just had these Rabbanim who would travel around, asking, for funds for their for their communities back in. So while he was in Italy, he discovered an unpublished manuscript of the Ramban. He must have said Ramban. He's the one who wrote that commentary on Chumash, right? And upon that, he wrote a commentary of his own on the Ramban's works, and he called it Hilchos Yom Tov. I'm on page 9. On the top. Page 9. You got to turn it. Page 9. Wait, I can't hear. What? That I had before? Right, I guess that's his name is Yom Tov. I don't know. His name is Yom Tov. Yeah, that's it. You have backtrack and you'll find his father's name because he was also a great scholar. Okay. And it's interesting. So, should you own an edition of the Vilna Shas, and you take it out the Gemara of Brachos, and you'll find that his commentary on the these halachos of the Ramban there are there. So obviously, was considered to be a really very knowledgeable, but I have personally heard of. Um, he appointed his son to be administrator over the affairs of the Hebron community. So obviously, this is a later date will be like Hebron Yeshiva, but this was a Sephardic, obviously, yeshiva or a Sephardic community in Hebron. When again his son was unable to help pay out their communal debts, the non-Jewish creditors became violent. They attacked him. They imprisoned him. And then Rabbi Yom Tov went to Constantinople. It was all part of the time, all Sephardic Jews, to raise the entire amount of the debt. But by the time he returned, his son Yaakov had died. And that when Nebuch, there he had gone on his behalf to here, where we're going to start one new unit. If you can come up here and get it, it's on Napoleon. But I am just finishing up one thing. This Maharit Al-Ghazi died in Jerusalem. He's buried on Har HaZeitim, next to the graves of his father and his Rebbe, Rabbi Shalom. Okay, next, Rabbi Moshe Miyuchas, 1738 to 1805. Here, this is where I am right now, page 9 of it. Just going through one letter, but just go to page 9, catch up to where I am. Rabbi Moshe Yosef is his son-in-law of the Maharit Al-Ghazi, succeeded his father as Rishon LeZion. I guess that's what's called the chief Rav, who's called the Rishon LeZion. Am I right about that? Okay. In the Sephardic community, right? So the head, who is the Sephardic Rav now? Right. Oh, he's now the. He succeeded his. I know from Shalom, it was London, Rabbi Dweck, but he's head of the Spanish Portuguese in London, and his wife is a sister to this Rav. Okay, he succeeded his father, Rishon LeZion. He wrote numerous sperm on the Shulchan Aruch, plus his own response. And again, just emphasize response. I mean, questions come to you, she'elo, and you return reply, and that's the teshuvot. It's called she'elo to teshuvot, or fancy word in English is responsa. When Napoleon, I'll pay attention, we're going to come to Napoleon in a minute, but now I'll tell you something interesting. Do you like to join us? All right. When Napoleon, now I don't know how much you know about Napoleon's background, but he became, during the time of the revolution, obviously he was backing those people, and he embarked on a career in the army, the French army, and then he went out on this campaign to try to conquer other parts of the world. And he came to the Middle East. Okay, so now this is what we're doing here. When Napoleon embarked on his ill-fated, it was not to conquer Eretz Yisrael from the Turks in 1799. Remember, the French Revolution is 1789. Okay. He called upon the Jews in Jerusalem to help him. The Arabs, who believed that the Jews intended to side with him, they decided to punish the Jews by not denying them access to the Kota. Never. What did he want these poor Jews in Jerusalem to do to help the Poles? But I guess, should he have thrived at the gates of Jerusalem, that they should, I don't know. I mean, they certainly weren't military. As Napoleon approached Jerusalem, the Arab mufti pleaded with the chief Chacham, Rabbi Miyuchas, to instruct the Jews to pray for the welfare of the city. So they obviously had sufficient respect, right, for this Rishon LeZion, the chief rabbi, to to feel that his prayers, would be on the side of the Arabs, not this Frenchman. So Rabbi Miyuchas then pointed out, well, the Arabs had denied the Jews access to the Kotel. Does that mean you want us to pray for you? You know, you're not allowing us to go pray at our holiest place, you know, to all of Yiddishkeit, you know, what is it? You know, but to go to this holiest site, if for the Jewish people in the Holy Land, the holy place, city, Jerusalem, holy spot, it would be the Mikdash. Immediately, the Mufti rescinded the previous order, and the Jews did indeed offer fervent prayers at the Kotel. Now, I'm not sure how they phrased it, but did they have any respect or love for the Mufti? No. On the other hand, I mean, I'm sure they were a little concerned about Napoleon's, you know, attempted entry to Jerusalem. I mean, think about the Crusaders. I mean, that certainly ended up in disaster for the Jews. So Napoleon at the end turned away from Jerusalem. I know maybe he felt it was too difficult a campaign. He was too far from the sea, you know, at that point to get more supplies. So then he embarked on an unsuccessful siege of Akko in I think hopefully you know where Akko was north of Haifa. Before Haifa was built as a port, Akko was the major port. And should you ever have an interest or you know an opportunity to go to Israel, I happen to love Akko because it's fascinating and they have fantastic discoveries. There's so many, but there are layers and layers from the Roman times to the Crusader times, the British Mandate times. There's just these amazing things that one can find, and you can walk right along the ramparts, you know, of the city facing the Mediterranean. Again, he obviously so now he's trying to put a siege on Akko, and it's not being successful. And then he left. And from there, he goes to Cairo, and I don't know, he meets with a bit of success. But anyway, his Middle East trip ended up a fiasco. So, you know, but we're going to learn more now about Napoleon and his relations with the Jews of France. That's what we're going to see here. So, let me make sure. Let me just take everything. Okay. Now, I always tell my husband to enlarge the map so it's easy to read, but he also wants us to head. So sorry about that. Then he gets upset with me that I criticize what he's done. So, any case, you can see. So turn to you can sort of like this page first. And she did it on two-sided. So get to this page, which is going to talk about Napoleon and his campaign through Europe. All right. Let me just get my phone notes. For me, I make it one-sided. So wait, let me see. Now I have the original. So what was it? Okay, so this page, this is the title for this. It's the Emancipation of European Jewry, 1789 to 1918. Maybe we'll come back to that one later. Right. The other map is the one that says Napoleon and the Jews. I think we should turn to that, right? Okay, so this is the map that's for Napoleon and the Jews. It's yeah. So just put the right heading of yes. Oh, that he might have come from the. You know what? I didn't. You go back to what's an island, right? Let me tell you. You know, my kids left Monday night. Where I virtually. So I only had like these 2 days to prepare for this class. So I didn't have time to. I wanted to read his biography again, but I will. You know, next time I can fill in a little bit more detail. Okay. Napoleon and the Jews. So the French Revolution has already occurred. Meanwhile, he's just now this military guy going. stop the world, to conquer other areas. For France, we had the Reign of Terror, which lasted about 2 to 3 years, in which so many people were murdered in the guillotine. And now things are somewhat calming down, but now we need to have a new head. Well, the king has lost his head, right? There, I don't know. Did they have any children? Marie Antoinette and Napoleon, well, whatever they are, we don't hear about them. So they have to look for a new head. So Napoleon comes marching back to Paris. He wasn't really victorious in what he had done, but he's made a name for himself as being, a very powerful military commander. So he's now going to be edged his way in to become the head. So now I'll just read this with you. Napoleon diverted the French Revolution to his own end. First, he made himself the military dictator. And then he had himself declared as emperor. And maybe you've seen paintings, when he's pointed with all these great honor and pomp and circumstance. And he then tried to ally himself with Jewish emancipation. Now, this man had no great love for Jews, and he could care it less, but he figures, the Jews have already come to the revolutionaries and demand, requesting that they should be treated as equal citizens in France. I think we had touched upon this when I did a bit on the French Revolution. It is given to them, but then they have all sorts of qualifications as to, are you Jewish first or are you Frenchman first? I mean, the same thing's been done against Jews here in America, right? Are we loyal to the US or even now, how do you think? With the president, giving money support, anti-Semitism. He started off sounding good, not so great, right? Now we'll just go to the next paragraph. Napoleon had never even met any Jews. I mean, like that message. I should be successful. Didn't know anybody. And he understood nothing about Judaism. During his unsuccessful campaign in Palestine, right, about it, 1709, he had invited the Jews to accept him as his friend. He thereby tried to entice them, promising them Palestine for themselves. Yeah. This propaganda was soon forgotten, and Napoleon went for Egypt and then back to France. In general, Napoleon's attitude towards the Jews was based on the suspicions and prejudices of that day. And we know, again, that all these various manifestations of the Jews' attempt to gain equal rights, the big dispute was, well, just how loyal are you to France? Are you deserving of equal rights as any other French? And I think last time we had discussed it, we talked about that there was a difference between the Sephardic community, which is originally Spanish Portuguese, and the Ashkenazim. So the Ashkenazim resided mostly in Alsace-Lorraine. The Sephardim dwelled in Bordeaux and Bayonne. It's named after, there's a town in France, southwestern France, called Bayonne. So actually, so that other map, it doesn't show you here, but whatever, it's southwestern Paris. So when the Spanish Portuguese Jews were escaping from Spain, after the years of expulsion, some of them, a lot of them got on boats and went around and ended up, some went to Italy, some went to Amsterdam, and then from Italy, they would have gone to Constantinople. But some of them crossed over, I guess they went over the Pyrenees, and they settled in that southwestern part of France, and that's where Bordeaux and, okay. So now he's going to take it upon himself, the Jewish question. How should it be? Well, we'll find out what happened. So they got initially, not from Napoleon, they got initially from the revolutionaries, the idea that they could be granted all rights. But when Napoleon visited the provinces of Alsace and Lorraine, he found that the peasants there were complaining that the usury of the Jews was making it difficult for them to regain control of the land. Now, the whole purpose of the French Revolution was to revolt against the monarchy, right, and the church, and to take away the riches that the noblemen had accrued to themselves over the hard work, right, of the backs of the peasants. And now they're going to have a little bit of communism, so there'll be a redistribution of land, so that now these peasants who had formerly worked for the noblemen, which now they're abolishing that whole system, but they will have their own parcel of land to work. What had happened? What the Jews had done was actually legal. So these peasants who really never knew how to take care of themselves, to navigate through the economic world, because the noblemen always took care of it. They went to the Jews. They wanted to borrow money. I don't know, for seed, wagons, whatever they needed. But again, they did not know how to manage their farm. Now when the Jew, I'm sure perhaps the documents, were written up, and there was a certain amount of interest involved. I mean, that's a business practice. Don't you pay to your banks? You're paying interest. If you have a mortgage on your home, a big chunk of that is the interest on your loan. But these people are now having difficulty. They don't know how to manage their costs. Engendered, but after a certain amount of time, so the Jews are asked, you have to start repaying the loan, and as a regular business practice, they had charged interest on it. But the peasants are having problems, repaying these loans. And now Napoleon's going around checking up on them, seeing how they're doing, and they're complaining about those Jews, right? And they're charging usury, which usury really means like interest, but excessive interest. So they would have found it to be impossible. Now that the Jews were involved, so now all these financial dealings they had to have done, they're not considered criminal. So it's going right back to where they started in medieval times. And Napoleon was horrified by the activity. He wants to represent himself as a defender of the simple Frenchman, and so he's now going to go after the Jews. Napoleon was sure the Jews had to be treated differently from other portions of the French population. The policy had to be for them, partly of persuasion and partly of compulsion. This would break down the resistance to assimilation. You'll see that everything is tied up together. A novel approach had to be taken. The year 1806, as the Emperor of France, Napoleon issued a call to all the Jewish communities of France and of the provinces most closely attached. He invited them to send representatives to the newly formed special assembly. At this meeting, the Jews were to consult him on the future relationship between the Jews and the French Empire. This convocation was known as the Assembly of Notables, and it was organized as a ceremony, just like, he was elevated to the position of emperor, and it met in Paris, Paris being the capital. The first session was deliberately called on a Saturday, to see whether any Jews would object. This would prove, how loyal they are. Government. The Jewish representatives simply arranged to be present by avoiding traveling and writing on their Shabbos. So even now, sometimes they have to attend something in Congress or in the UK Parliament. So they go the day before, they stay in a hotel, and they arrange for kosher food to be brought to them. But then they go to a town where there were there was, and obviously they wouldn't have taken notes or they weren't writing anything. Um, there was little the notables were able to do anyway, as all they were asked to do was vote either yes or no for a list that was put to them by Napoleon's ministers. So there, I do have a paragraph about it, but then I was going through my library and I found it here actually lists the questions. So I will, go over page. Okay. One, is it lawful for Jews to marry more than one? And what does this have to do with being granted rights in the country? Okay. Now already, from from medieval times and the Ashkenazi communities, right? You could only take one wife, all right? But in the Sephardic communities, I'm not sure about those Sephardic communities in France, if they were having more than one wife. But in any case, in general, the French are viewed more positively. The Sephardic Jews, they felt they had acclimated themselves. They were speaking French. They weren't speaking Yiddish. They were more modern, so to speak, for that time period. Okay, here's this question number one. But again, what does this have to do with right? Two, is divorce allowed by the Jewish religion? You know it is. Is divorce valid when not pronounced by courts of justice and by virtue of laws in contradiction with the French code? So they're trying to take it out of the hands of the rabbis and to make that the French courts, make these decisions, right? Three, can a Jew marry a Christian or a Jew a Christian woman? Or has the law ordered that the Jews should only intermarry among themselves? We all know what it is. So I know these were like the very provoking questions. Again, and what does this have to do with their rights? Four, in the eyes of Jews, are Frenchmen considered as brethren or as strangers? Five, in either case, what conduct does their law prescribe towards Frenchmen not of their religion? Well, perhaps you've heard this famous dictum from the Quran, Dina de Mahuta Dina, which means this is a law incumbent upon every Jew, wherever you might find yourself dwelling, that the law of the land has to be adopted by you too, and you have to follow those laws. Okay. 6. Do the Jews born in France and treated by the law as French citizens consider their country? It's like they were still suspicious of them, that they weren't really loyal French. Are they bound to defend it? Are they bound to obey the laws and to follow the directions of the civil code? 7. What kind of police jurisdiction have the rabbis among the Jews? What judicial power do they exercise among them? So what do you think that's referring to? How do they enforce the laws if somebody went against them? Talking about the rabbanim. They would put somebody in Cairo. Well, I think the Frenchmen like this. Or they didn't want the rabbis to have power. Notice, did they bring the Catholic Church and put them on trial? Oh, because 80% of Frenchmen are Catholic. 8. Are the forms of the elections by the rabbis and their police jurisdiction regulated by law, or are they only sanctioned by custom? So they're trying to differentiate the minhagim. Are the minhagim considered halacha? In a way, they have become that way, right? No, but this is one of the questions. Are there professions from which the Jews are excluded by their law? Are there? I don't know if that's true, but they obviously were suspicious. Does the law forbid the Jews from taking usury from their brethren? Yes, it does. Of course, they get around that, but okay. Right. Does it forbid or does it allow usury towards strangers? And yes, it does. Okay. But these were the types of questions that they were so concerned about. There are no questions here, well, except for that one perhaps, you know, which are they that they're questioning your loyalty. You know, will they pay their taxes? Will they serve in the army? I mean, some of those are justifiable questions, but some of these are like ridiculous demands. So, I mean, we just went over the questions, but I'll just look at that paragraph. The questions themselves reflected the prejudices which then surrounded the Jews. Did the Jews consider they engage in manual labor, or did they insist on living by usury? Well, you gave us no choice for hundreds of years. We could not earn a living any other way. Could Jews marry more than one wife? Was it possible to encourage intermarriage? So basically, what they want the Jews is to give up their Judaism and marry other Christian Frenchmen and become blend right in. So again, do they encourage intermarriage? No, we know that. Of course, the Jews considered themselves to be French, and of course, they had no objection to manual labor, but money lending had been forced upon them by historical considerations. And while assimilation was one thing, in other words, trying, become more part and parcel of the general French population, maybe obviously changing the dress, that would apply to the Ashkenazim and Alsace. And I told you the Fordham or have already blended into most the general French population. But obviously even though Fordham, they were opposed to intermarriage. Voted for such a thing. Regardless, the answers which the notables gave showed sufficient humility to satisfy Napoleon. All right. But the emperor is still not satisfied. All right, he already has this assembly of notables, presented them with questions. We need to delve into this problem further. He wanted to make the pledge of Jewish loyalty and the admission of Jewish subordination even more dramatic and violent. So you're still separating us from the general population, because you're making us take these oaths, and do other things that make us stand apart. He therefore tried to revive the most dignified legislative institution of the Jewish past, and that of the Sanhedrin. So he actually going to call together a group of notable people, including Rabbanim, to establish a Sanhedrin. This is not some halachic body, but he just liked the idea of combining the past together now with this present. Again, orders went forth to the various provincial governors to select Jewish representatives. This time, a majority of 46 were rabbis. Napoleon now took care that most of those selected would not oppose the decisions of the notables. So for any reason, a Jew would have objected some of those questions that were being foisted upon them, or they wouldn't even ask to be a part of it. So you already are skewing it, to approve just Napoleon. Again, because, but it went to his head, this idea that, he is going to reestablish the Sanhedrin of old. But his whole purpose, and he couldn't care about how because he wants the Jews to assimilate, so he really couldn't care less. He just needs to have some sort of an official body that he expects will vote in favor of all his legislation. Yes.
In our math, do you think it was a question of accepting the simply as parallel or as a national? And if he was looking at the policy, he was aware of what the status of the church was.
Right, yeah.
And decision. And that's why he wanted to establish
a similar, right. I mean, I would say all these things played a factor and why this Sanhedrin was called into existence. It's not because he loved the Jews and he wanted to bring bring back your legislative body, it was his, whatever he wanted to be done, he just wanted them to rubber stamp, whatever. So according to tradition, some have 17 members, there's a Nasi who's the head of it, and whatever ceremonials that could be devised, I don't know, whatever. Having marched in, maybe they have wear special robes, I don't know. They reaffirmed the decisions of the notables, declaring themselves Frenchmen of the Jewish faith, on whom the laws of the state were as binding as on any citizen. That's interesting because the whole French Revolution was against not just the monarchy, it was against the church. So why would they want to favor a particular religion? On the other hand, this is now, yes, exactly, right. Yeah, liberté, égalité, fraternité, right, exactly. But I don't know why he got himself involved. I mean, the question of the Jews was out there, so he thinks we'll take advantage of it. This will add to his glorification. No, it's ridiculous. So they reaffirmed the decision of the notables, claimed themselves Frenchmen, the Jewish faith, and whom the laws of the state. Okay. They even freed soldiers in the French army from religious obligations, and they declared usury illegal. Now, what does this mean? You could, and in the early days of during the Civil War in America, this happened. If you were called up to serve in the army, but you didn't wish to do so, you could find a substitute, some poor slob, so you take my place, I'll pay you something, and you serve in the army in my state. So this was a practice, obviously, even the French army. Now, Christians were still allowed to do this, but the Jews are not able to find substitutes for themselves. Okay, and they declared usury illegal. I mean, it repeats itself. They refused, however, to have rabbis officiate at mixed marriages. Now, because remember, this is one of these things, the Jews need to assimilate, they should intermarry. Listen, they gave in to a lot of things, but this was one thing that they were not, going to agree to. As far as Napoleon was concerned, the entire matter was just a propaganda trick. Well, it was a propaganda trick from his side, too. So, we were playing games here. Napoleon, however, was not a friend of the Jews, right? Sometimes, depending what book you might read, in his favor, to praise Napoleon and praise Jews. Look how nice he had this assembly of notables. He had a Sanhedrin. This sounds very lovely, but you have to understand his reason behind it. He was not in any sense of being a persecutor, right? He didn't bring any onerous laws against the Jews, but like so many intolerant non-Jews, he was impatient with Jewish persistence. If we wanted to still remain as Jews, we would be loyal citizens, to our country in which we live, to France, but don't tell us to change how we live and conduct our personal. He saw no point in the survival of the Jewish people. He wanted us just to, totally disappear into the general population. And he felt that Judaism was harmful. I don't know, back to that usury thing again. He was determined to cure the Jews of their fault, even if he had to do it by force. Well, now we're getting nasty. Napoleon now published a number of edicts which became known as the infamous decrees. They suspended the repayment of debt to Jews. And again, this happened, throughout medieval Jewish history too, the same thing. For a period of 10 years. So after 10 years, are you still going to go after Simone, to ask for the money to be given back? Basically, average, the repayment. They denied the Jews the right to settle in certain parts of France. That's interesting. Unless they became farmers. Well, what do they know about Africa? Think of those early Zionists never who went to Israel, living in a different, totally different climate coming from Europe. And believe you me, they were not very good farmers. I mean, they did learn eventually, but the conditions were very harsh. They imposed restrictions on Jews who wanted to go into business. They insisted on Jews conscripted into the army could also, which I discussed, no substitute for themselves as Christians were permitted. Napoleon thus took away from the Jews of France and its conquered territories much of what they had hailed with such joy as the fruits of revolution. And the Jews were, so excited at the beginning, the time period of the French Revolution for a number of years after. But here we are now, beginning of the 19th century, and all these gains at the fact that now we're going to be accepted as equals in French society, according to French law, and this is all being dashed. One part of these increases did last for a century. This is something interesting. This was the organization of Jewish religious life on a similar model as that of Catholics and Protestants. All local congregations were joined into one body, directed by a board of laymen and rabbis, and called a consistoire, proper French word. This organization had complete authority over synagogue ritual and property. And notice, this is sort of like a governmental authority. It's not that Jews decide, okay, we're going to put together a group of rabbanim and prominent, non-rabbinic leaders of our community, and they're going to make decisions. So this is being imposed by the government upon the Jewish people. The local consistories were in turn joined together under a national. The difference between Jewish and non-Jewish consistories was that in the case of the Christians, the state contributed toward the salaries of the clergy, whereas the rabbis were to be paid by the Jews without any state. You read this, it's like Gornish told me. I mean, we tried so hard, to identify loyal. We're just like anybody else. We're human beings, just like anybody else. That all these laws and restrictions. And look here in America, we thought, well, we're not finished with all the ugly venom, directed towards us, and it's just rearing its ugly, ugly head. Next time, so first of all, I'll look up a little bit more information about it. So I can share that next time. I know, I'm trying to remember. He did go to school. Canada, that's what it was. Okay, I do remember learning that. I'll fill in next time. Well, he became French. Let's put it that way. He became French, Yeah, I mean, but he moved. He obviously had good military acumen, and he built himself up, and look, they made him emperor for heaven's sake. So they obviously, felt he had great ability, and there must have been something about his personality, that appealed to the Frenchmen of those days. But then he went to his head, because then he has himself declared emperor. I mean, the kings of France, and he called themselves emperor. King Louis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, going all the way up. It's very interesting. By the way, I have to show when in England, there's also like an official relationship between the chief rabbi and the government of England. He's always invited to anything is official done. Well, it was by the Queen. I mean, Shalom gets invited as being the rabbi of Bevis Market congregation in England. He gets invited to these fancy things. He said the first time he was invited by the Lord Mayor of London, invited him to come. So they did. They were very nice. They made sure he had kosher food and everything. But Shalom says, you go up the steps and there are these guards dressed in red, which is we being Americans, it's like, whoa, French American Revolution, fighting against the redcoats. And there they are. And then he comes in and then they blow like a horn and they introduce him, right? Rabbi Shalom Mars. He had a lot of fun. And they do it every few years. And the Lord Mayor's house is really gorgeous. And it's just like, when the Queen would have these banquets, well, the Queen's no longer. Like basically not. Nah, they never met. No. The chief rabbi, Lord Jonathan Sachs, he had met the Queen. But, I don't know about Mervis. Well, I think he was there at the ceremony where Charles was. Right, and that was probably done probably was at Westminster. Probably, I mean, that's a church, but that's where he would have been inducted. But again, all those rabbis, they came Friday, and they stayed at I think Rabbi Dweck, representing the Portuguese community, came in. Now Shalom wasn't invited to that one, so it would have been kind of fun. I told him he should extend an invitation to William. They're around the same age. Nice. And who knows? He might become the king pretty soon. Who knows what's going on there? All right, everybody. Well, wait. Let me just turn this on. Well. Oh, and then he walked over. Probably they all did.